everybody. My name is Sloan, also known on Tumblr as Badlands Polaroid. You'll have to excuse me for being weird and not eloquent at all. This is like my first real YouTube video, and I've always felt like really weird and nervous about it. I decided to do like a video series that I've been wanting to do for a while, but haven't, because I was really anxious about it, because I felt like people were going to take it the wrong way. But I also know that if I'm not pissing anybody off, I'm not doing right. But just to give you a little scope about myself, like I said, my name's Sloan. I don't have a degree at all. I'm working on it. Hopefully someday in like business, education, nonprofit administration, and Native studies. But these are just opinions from a Native person who lives in North America and the USA specifically, who's Oglala Lakota, and my people are from Pine Ridge Reservation, so that's where my experience comes from, as well as being on Tumblr, I guess. But these videos also, they don't support white commentary at all. They're just primarily for Native people and the struggles within our community. I'd also like to point out I'm reading from something because I can't remember all of this. But they're primarily for Native people, Indigenous people within our communities or abroad. Another POC commentary, of course, is acceptable in the terms of the struggles that they face in their communities and how it relates to ours, like in solutions if they find them, how they feel about it, things like that. And when I say Native people, I mean people, who live their lives as Indigenous, who have, like legitimate claim to Native ancestry or support their Native community. And I also mean people who work for Indigenous rights, or POC rights, or who want to significantly impact their Native community, who've grown up with traditional beliefs, or on the res, or even off the res, who might live traditionally, or at least they take the responsibility of living as Indigenous seriously, or really take seriously trying to find out their Native ancestry, for personal reasons, and then trying to impact the community from there on out. But like I said, I've really been wanting to do this video series for a while. It's about problems in Indian country, and the shit that really pisses me off or really bothers me. But the source came from one of the posts from Black Native Tumblrs, and the reactions, or lack thereof, from the surrounding Indian community on Tumblr. But it desperately disturbed me at the lack of commentary and reaction by fellow non-Black Native people. And it also made me think about all the other shit that happens in Indian community at large that we don't address, we don't like to talk about, or that POC communities don't like to talk about in general, lest the outside world hear about them or use them against us, But this is the shit that, the type of stuff that seriously limits our ability to succeed and become self-sufficient nations and communities at large. So my first subject is going to be about racism in the Indian community in regards to anti-Black sentiment throughout the community, which is, I think, a real problem that we seem heartily unwilling to open dialogue about. And I think we really have to have proactive discourse about the problems that we ourselves cause within our communities, as well as the things that drive me fucking crazy, that really bother me. So first off, like I said, the whole idea started when I saw what some of the other Black natives were going through. They were posting, very real emotional things about their experiences as Black Indians, which were largely ignored, I think, by the rest of us, and eventually labeled as, it's being too serious around here, here's stuff for laughs, let's all chill out, which I think is really unfair. But one specific post I read was about a Black Native who felt that they didn't belong in the Indian Tumblr community because of past commentary on Tumblr and how hurtful that was to them. And I think for as many of us who are mixed natives, we can relate to those feelings and fear of not being accepted as legitimately Native people, and which I feel is the reason that we feel that we have to work so hard in turn to show that we care about our communities. Because, some of us don't look Native at all, so we have to try that much harder to be taken seriously. And I mean, there have been a number of times where I felt that I didn't belong or was openly rejected by friends or peers and even Native peers, and it was so hurtful to be rejected by people that you wanted to be a part of, or you felt like you wanted to go and work towards this common cause, but you just couldn't because they just weren't in line with how you felt, and they just didn't understand you, and they rejected you. And then to be rejected by people online that are supposed to have your back is unacceptable, especially within a safe space that Tumblr has offered me as a mixed Native person. I feel should be open to all mixed Natives, white or black or whatever. But I feel that if I were to feel that I couldn't be accepted in the one and only thing that has given me a safe space in which to feel that I had a voice, I would be legitimately heartbroken, you know. And we have to realize and accept that there are anti-black sentiments within Indian country, and we really have to do something about it. Part of one of the things that we have to do if we're ever going to succeed. So, you know, let's talk about that anti-black sentiment a little bit now. And I'm going to bring up the Freedmen settlement. And I was unsure about bringing it up because I know it's like a really touchy subject. And people said they were tired about talking about it. But, I mean, this is shit that we really have to discuss. And I think we should talk about it, tired of as we are of it or not. You know, that's really not the point. It's real, and we really have to create a public discourse among ourselves for these feelings. And for people outside of the Native community who might be watching this, it's a really volatile situation because you know, there's a lack of knowledge outside of the Native community about sovereignty, you know, government funds, blood quantum, enrollment, etc., that they just have no idea about and will never understand. It's just, you know, it sucks. But having said that, we have to talk about the Freedmen settlement and what it means for Black Natives and what it says about our stance on Black Natives. First thing to understand is I totally 100% of course support tribal sovereignty, and with sovereignty comes the right for nations to make decisions that are seriously fucked up, and those rights lie within the registered people who can vote within those tribes. I totally get that. I support that 100%. I get it, you know, I'm there. However, we also have to admit to pasts that we would rather not talk about. And that means slavery within some of our nation's past, you know, some of our tribal nations' past. And we can't demand also that the American government stand by their word on treaties if we're not also willing to stand by our own. That's how I feel about it. And if I feel that my tribe owns slaves and we promised them compensation for all the pain and suffering that we had caused them to endure, that promise should be followed lest we end up being huge fucking hypocrites. There are nations that own slaves and they owe them what was promised. And I think as people who are constantly subjugated, as we are, and often on the bottom ladder of priorities when it comes to ethnic groups, I don't think it's fair to deny people their rights or ignore the suffering of their ancestors, especially if we are the cause of them. And some people have stated that if the freedmen wanted to be enrolled, they should just get enrolled. You know, since the Cherokee have lax enrollment standards by other nations' standards, if they had a legitimate claim to tribal enrollment, they could easily get it. Which is true, but the thing to remember is that knowing your past is a privilege. I mean, it's so much a privilege, because for Black people, their history often stops with slavery because their names were changed, their history's forged, and on goes the list. I mean, my friend Daisy is married to a Black man. His last name's Johnson, and his last name's Johnson because that was his family's slave owner's name. I mean, he doesn't know what country he comes from back in Africa. He doesn't know that. But, you know, on the same list as their names, you'll see the prices that their grandmothers were sold for. And knowing your history is a privilege, and for these people, that history was sold along with their relatives, so they might not legitimately know and have a right and claim to that heritage. But the point is that we can't blame others for injustice when we should be accountable for our own as well. And I demand that we keep the promises that we make, and it is the only right thing to do. It's the only right thing to do. That's it. And to follow up with this, if for you it was all about the tribal sovereignty, even if that choice was a bad one, I get you. I understand that choice. But what worries me about choices like this that other tribes might have to make in the future is the impact it's going to have on our fellow Native people who are also Black, who maybe weren't even a part of, who are a part Cherokee or whatever. Because what ends up happening is these decisions have really long-reaching after effects that make these people feel alienated, unwanted, and disgusting. And like fellow mixed people, they're faced with belonging in both communities and one or the other. And like us, they have every right to the heritage that they inherited, And it should be a real concern if we're going to pass laws like this and exert our tribal sovereignty. But I don't think it should be at the cost of alienating, our fellow Black natives. And also that because, like other Native people who are Black, they're going to face open discrimination from other Native people. Like, for example, one Anon said to a Black Native tumblr that if she got raped, it would be because she was Black, not because the person thought that she was Native. Let's think about that for a second. Yes, somebody's going to notice that she's Black before she's Native, but I really don't think that was appropriate in any way, shape, or form. But that's the sort of stuff that they're going to get rather than what I'm going to get because I'm half white. You know what I mean? But the fact is that I would never get a response like that. I would never get open discrimination like that because while people can tell that I'm mixed, they can also tell that I'm Native. And it goes back kind of like to the one drop Black rule, that if you have one drop of noticeable Black blood or one drop Black blood, like you're going to be considered Black. And people have internalized that racism in the Indian community and deny people who might have a blood quantum that's higher than I do, a right to their heritage. But it's also because of the fact that they're Black that it's this kind of like power play thing where I think some Native people feel like way more comfortable calling out a Black person than they would somebody that has lighter coloring than me. Their Blackness is kind of a noticeable reminder of genocide, not at the hands of Black people, but at the hands of white people. It's kind of a reminder that our communities are thinning and a fear that we're going to lose everything, either to appropriation or gentrification. And I also think it's important to point out that a lack of resources caused this situation like the Freedmen settlement, where Native communities are so much more underfunded than other ethnic communities. It's just a fact. And I'm not trying to play oppression Olympics here or anything. But the fact is that all of our communities are fighting for the same table scraps and end up fighting each other to get them. And in the end, some people made choices and said things that they might not have done otherwise. And if we had not been made to fight each other for the little that we're all given. I also think that there's a sentiment towards resentment towards Black natives because of the fact that the Black community has such a larger voice than we have in this country, America, USA, a right which they had to fight for, of course. But there are Black musicians, Black artists, Black politicians, Black activists, Black scientists, Black doctors. Everybody's seen one or knows one. And it's not saying that there aren't horrific stereotypes that Black people have to fight against, or that these jobs weren't hard won. But I think the resentment stems from the fact that the Black community does have a real voice in this country, no matter how small it is, and it's featured some way in the public consciousness. And natives don't have that, we don't have noticeable Native people on primetime television, artists who gain national attention, people in office who are known by the community at large or for the work they've done for our community. And most of the country doesn't even know about the American Indian movement. It's kind of like our civil rights movement then ended up getting us some rights, but nowhere garnered near the attention that the civil rights movement does. And people to this day still don't know about it at all. I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to keep going on because I don't know what the limit is for YouTube. So, just a second.